Welcome into Rounding the Bases.
Round the bases. Everybody knows Joe Goldberg. It's around the bases. Everybody knows Joe Goldberg.
Hey everybody, welcome into another episode of Rounding the Bases presented by Community America Credit Union, invested in you. I'm Joel Goldberg. Great to have you here for this episode. It's an important one, and we've been featuring guests this month in Women's History Month that are making an impact, and as is the case every year that I do this for Women's History Month. Same thing for Black History Month in February. Not necessarily talking about that, just making sure that representation is there. It's important to me, and I think that the woman that I'm going to introduce you to today is making a major impact with something that is so important. I do want to say, first off, a shout out to my friends at Chief of Staff Kansas City. I'm a networker, I'm a connector, and they are unbelievable. If you're looking for a job, if you are looking to hire someone, if you're looking for a resource, check them out. chiefofstaffkc.com, making connections that matter. There's a reason why I'm connected with them. They're great partners of mine. I love that relationship. And I should also let everybody know, as this is coming out on March 25th. Now, you might be listening to this in December, or it might be 2028. I don't know. I assume podcasts will still be going then. But if you're listening to this the week it comes out, it's opening day this week. Baseball starts. A quick reminder that this podcast is 52 weeks of the year. My incredible assistant, Ashley, and my team, Colleen and Kendall, they do a great job of helping me and contributing to this podcast in ways that enable us to do this 52 weeks a year and to be able to get everything done in advance so that I could do both this and travel with the Royals. But if you're coming out to opening day or you're coming out to the ballpark this year, please come by and say hi. Would love to visit with you. Now, as far as my guest today, I'm joined by an incredible woman who has made it her mission to help families facing mental health struggles. Her name is Susie Gurley, creator and host of the Just a Mom podcast. Using powerful stories with real people, she uses her own experience parenting a child with mental illness to connect others on a similar journey. She may not be a therapist, counselor, or doctor, but by offering a space to feel supported and seen, she creates a healing sense of hope and the comfort of knowing that even in the darkest days, you never have to walk the path alone. This is so important. I think that if we came up with this topic 20 years ago or 10 years ago, people would say, what? I'm not talking about that. It's becoming much more common, for better and worse. And I'm joined right now by Susie Gurley. You shake your head because it's like, yeah, I wish, and I know you wish we didn't have to talk about it. Yeah. But we do. And because we do, for me at least, I think every time we talk about it, just chips a tiny bit away at the stigma. I don't know why I'm waxing on this one. I'll let you do that. But Susie, thanks for joining the podcast.
Joel, thanks so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
Okay, let's talk about all of this because, there are no rules on this podcast. A lot of people in leadership, a lot of people that are entrepreneurs, and for me, a lot of people that are just doing really important and good things that I think that we should all know about. You are one of them. Let's talk about how all of this started. First off, none of us grew up thinking we'd host a podcast because nothing like that existed. But you are a podcaster just like me. Tell me about your podcasting world, and then we'll get into how you ended up there.
Sure. Well, it's so funny to me that you would say that because, I went to college before the internet existed. Okay.
Me too.
So, right. And what in the world would a podcast have even been? So the whole idea that I host a podcast, I still sometimes just chuckle to myself. I think it's so funny in a lot of ways. And as my family could attest to, I could barely turn on a computer. So much less, figure out how to push the right buttons and make sure things are recording. So yeah, that is just really funny to me. I did launch the Just a Mom podcast in September of 2022, just past the 100 episode mark on March 11th. Thank you. And, unfortunately, as the case is, there is never any shortage of material or people to talk to or different types of subjects to cover. And what I hope to do through the Just a Mom podcast is just to let people know that they are not alone and there is hope. And I know from my personal experience that there were many times that I felt extremely alone.
Mhm.
And the reason I chose the podcasting format is because it's free, it's accessible, you can listen anytime, any place, anywhere. And you might not be ready to call a therapist or you might not be ready to open up to a friend, but if you hear somebody say something that resonates with how you're feeling, then that just helps you feel not quite so alone.
That's such an important piece of the battle. And I've got to assume that with this podcast, you're constantly hearing from people, which has to be complete mixed emotions because in some ways you'd rather hear from no one, although we know better than that, right?
Yeah.
It's like that someone that does the type of work where you say, boy, I wish I was out of work, but I'm never going to be out of work. And I think it's probably a lot of that. At the same time, I feel like we're making strides on some things, and I don't know what this looks like in 5 or 10 years, but how unique of a position is that for you? That, I said in the intro, you're not a doctor, you're not a therapist, but you've become a lot of people's therapists, right? I mean, it just by letting them know that they're not alone and sharing these experiences. What's that experience like for you?
That's a great question. And I don't know that I have become anyone's therapist per se. What I like to do is I like to help people share their own stories. And I feel a tremendous sense of responsibility in doing that, that they are entrusting me with some very deeply personal information. And so I want to steward that really well. And because of that, like you said, there's not a week that goes by that I'm not contacted by somebody, very likely these days, someone I don't know, asking for resources or help or can I be on the podcast? I want to share my story, that kind of thing. And that actually started several years before I launched the podcast
Mm.
because of what my son Will did. And so, do you want me to go ahead and talk about that now
Yeah,
or?
of course.
Okay.
And because that was going to be the next follow up is take us back and as much as you're comfortable, I think, and I've watched some videos and seeing it looks like Will is comfortable too, which has to make you so proud that he's in a position right now to want to use his experiences to help others, and certainly as the mom, that's what you're doing. But yeah, take us back to where this all started.
Our story started about 8 years ago, and it was May of 2017. And my husband Dan and I were celebrating our 25th anniversary. We were out of town, and I got a phone call. And that phone call changed my life forever. It was the school principal, and she called and said, I have Will here in the counselor's office. He sent an email last night saying that he was really struggling. He had been cutting, he was maybe depressed, and we have him safe here, and we wanted to let you know what's going on. And I was in complete and utter shock. And that, of course, was the beginning of our journey. And thankfully, we were able to quickly get him into a therapist, which just really doesn't happen very often, especially post COVID. It's so hard to get into therapists now. But we were able to get him into a therapist within a matter of days. And she said, I think he's clinically depressed after spending some time with him, and he needs to see a physician as well as me. Again, this doesn't happen, but we made a phone call, and the child psychiatrist, who was a friend of ours, said, bring him over tonight. I want to see him tonight.
Mm.
And we left with a handful of prescriptions. And for months, it was therapy 2 to 3 times a week, checking in with the psychiatrist weekly. There was a point when Will went to intensive outpatient treatment for several hours a day, multiple times a week. And it was really kind of the whole world that I was living for months. Um, I talk about it very openly because Will shares his story very openly, but he slept on a mattress on our floor next to my side of the bed for weeks because he was ideating suicide, and we didn't trust him enough to leave him alone. We didn't leave him alone. We didn't go, we kind of took turns, really, where the psychiatrist at one point said, you know, I'm thinking about hospitalization, but if you guys can keep him safe 24/7, we'll keep him out of the hospital because that would be best. And so that's what we did. And the only time Will was really ever alone was when he was in the bathroom, and I would stand literally right outside the door, and I would knock, every 30 seconds or probably 10 seconds. Will, you okay? Talk to me, make some noise, let me know you're okay. So that was a long several months of probably one of the most difficult things I'd ever been through at
Yeah.
that time. All that to say that as Will started to heal and get better, he watched the 2018 Grammy Awards and he saw the 1-800 Suicide Prevention Lifeline song performed. And he was inspired at that time to use his own love of music to start a music festival in Kansas City. And when he came to us with the idea, we thought, oh, sure, yeah, we'll set up some chairs in the backyard and invite our friends over and you can play your music and we'll call it a music festival. But he had very different ideas. He actually secured a local football stadium, hired a sound company, and on August 11th of 2018, the first You Matter Festival was held with 1,000 people in attendance.
Wow.
And that was where Will publicly shared his story for the first time. And prior to that, a couple of weeks prior to that, we had met with a family who has a foundation because they lost their son to suicide. And up until that point, I had been really nervous about Will, like, telling all the world his story. And when we went to meet with this family, it really hit me that what they wouldn't do to be sitting in my position where my son was sitting next to me and theirs was gone. And that really changed my view forever of being hesitant for Will to share his story. Because I knew that there are so many people who needed to hear it, and Will really wanted to help other kids. He was 15 at that time, other kids in the area who were struggling, and let them know that it's okay to ask for help. There's help out there, and you're not the only one who's struggling. And the You Matter Festival ran for 5 years and impacted over 10,000 people. And that was really the kind of the impetus behind the Just a Mom podcast, because after that first You Matter festival and Will sharing his story, people started calling me, texting me, emailing me, hey, will you talk to so and so? Her kid's really struggling. Hey, I've got this friend, just over and over. So I would just meet with people quietly behind the scenes, talk, give resources, etc. And then I took Will a couple years after that to film a video for 0 Reasons Why, which is a local campaign, right? And when he was finished with his video, they said, hey, Susie, would you do a video? We haven't really had any parents do a video. And I was like, well, I guess I don't really have anything important to say. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a therapist. I'm just a mom. But I'm happy to if maybe it'll help somebody. So I did, and I kind of honestly forgot about it. And then a few months later, one night, my husband's scrolling Facebook and he said, hey, you know that video that you did for 0 Reasons Why? It's been seen 10,000 times. And I was like, okay, well, what am I supposed to do with that? And he was really the one who pushed me and said, I think you need to do something. You said something that resonated with people. So we kind of talked about it for a while and really dissected, what did I say? I didn't say anything earth-shattering or important. But what I realized is that I said something. I spoke up. I shared about our story. I shared about, some of the scary things that we went through, and I said it in the open, and I said it on a video, and that really resonated with people. And that was why we decided that, okay, we need to do something about this. And I have a very dusty background, old background in journalism, and originally thought about writing a blog, but then again, it was Dan's idea. He's like, hey, you should do a podcast. I'm like, what's that? No, I probably knew
We
what it
didn't
was.
we didn't learn that in journalism school.
Yeah, and so I was like, "Yeah, okay," and so I kicked it down the curb for quite a while. The idea I had been, like I said, big supporter of Will's and putting him out there, but I had been in the background for a long time, and the idea of putting myself out there was terrifying to
Yeah.
me, and finally, I kinda had a revelation of, "You know what? You are uniquely positioned right now to do this." And I felt very compelled and called to start the Just a Mom podcast, and that was, like I said, 2.5 years ago, the first episode launched, and we're over 100 episodes strong now.
You know, it's I mean, it stinks that you had to get here, but now the purpose involved for you too. You know, like I know so many people around our age range, and we're close in age. I'm pretty sure just based on the amount of years we've been married and all that kind of stuff. Um, and it a lot of people, you know, in their 50s, maybe 60s, maybe even 40s, I don't know. I think we start to look for our purpose if we haven't found it. You know, like I mean, for me, I'm on the personal end. It's like, shoot, I went to journalism school. I wanted to be on TV, and it all worked out. And 30 years later, I'm still doing that. That's enough to fill me most days. But really, the sweet spot came when I started finding the deeper purpose, that it was much more than just a baseball game. And in my world, understanding that people, by the way, maybe even people going through mental health, but that people are tuning in to be entertained. People are tuning in stationed overseas wanting a piece of home. People are tuning in from a hospital bed. And it became so much. So like people say to me, like, boy, how'd you handle that 106 loss season a couple of years ago? Well, look, you know, I wish they won more, and last year was much better, and this year should be really good. But if they don't, I'm going to be fine, because I know that I'm able to impact people. And so I think that we all have a purpose, and sometimes we have to look for it. Sometimes it hits us square in the face, as it did with you. But even still, you didn't understand until that one post goes out there. And so, yes, I think obviously credit to Dan for pushing you down that way. Maybe you would have found it. I don't know. It's interesting because when we put out social media, whether we want to admit it or not, most of us then look and see how many people viewed it or liked it or whatever. I mean, we're a lot of us are guilty, just like the kids are, of having the adrenaline, the endorphins, everything that comes with it. In your case, it had to have been like an aha moment, or just a, oh my gosh. I mean, looking back at it now, like, it kind of makes sense based on where we're at in society. But that had to have been just the most mind-blowing thing for you. And I'm guessing that the emotions, I mean, if everyone's that interested, it means people are going through what you went through, and suddenly realizing that you can be that voice. What were those emotions like? Because it had to have been hitting you in a lot of ways.
You are spot on, and I remember that night. I mean, I can visualize it very clearly that night when Dan said that, because I still am not big on social media. I definitely wasn't then. And so I would have had no idea had he not told me, because I don't really look at it. But just feeling overwhelmed in a way, that many people were resonating with it, and knowing that, again, I've been uniquely positioned in that in this moment and of time to do something that might help a few people. And I think that one of the phrases that I've heard in the not too distant past that really resonates with me is, I didn't choose my life's work, it chose me. And we were on the precipice at that time of becoming empty nesters, and I was thinking about doing something completely different. And here, this just literally falls in my lap. What am I going to do with this? And truly, to your point of purpose, like, yes, I believe this is my purpose at this point in time. And I say all the time, I will continue to do the Just a Mom podcast until there's nobody left to talk to about this, and there's no need to continue to share stories and resources. And I hope that that's sooner rather than later, and I know that that's probably not the case. So it is an interesting position to be in, to carry a lot of these stories. I mean, you can't see it right now, but I'll hold it up. Like, I have a box of Kleenex here
Mm.
on my desk because I don't think I've ever gotten through an interview with a parent or a family member or someone with lived experience where I haven't needed Kleenex,
Mm.
because this is so deeply personal
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it's hard, and there's a lot of sadness, and there's joy too, yes. But I just want to be very real and honest about how difficult these journeys and stories can be.
And they're all different. Like, for me, I think that the you're not alone piece of it is the common bond.
Mhm.
But, because Will was able to get that help, and I'm guessing was receptive to that help. By the way, like 14, 15, 16, 17-year-old boys. By the way, this isn't just a boy thing either,
No.
but teenage boys are stubborn. Of
Yes.
course they are. We all know that. So for him to have been open to that type of treatment, maybe this was in the cards for him. I don't know. Like, maybe this is what he was born to do, to help others. And I don't know. These are just the thoughts going through my head. But to compare his situation to anyone else's is got to be a hard thing to do. Yet there's always going to be a commonality, right? There's always that, hey, things could get better. Like, you
Mhm.
can't see it right now, but you might look back and be like, gosh, remember what that was like, and look at how far we've come. Sadly, it's
Mhm.
not that way for everybody. And so I don't
Right.
want to paint with such a broad brush on this one. Or
Right.
maybe you need to paint with a more of a broad brush, because it's not specific to every single one. But I think that the specificity is the pain, the challenges. And I think, and I'd love for you to talk about this, Susie. I think there are more people going through it than what maybe you realize in the moment. Like, to me, that's the beauty and the importance of sharing these stories. If it gives somebody else a little belief or a hope that, wait a minute, we're not different here. We're actually maybe more the norm in today's society. Is that accurate?
Absolutely. I mean, the statistics show us that, and particularly post-COVID, where you had, over 50% of high schoolers saying, "I feel persistently sad and hopeless." Wow, what? Like, oh, 50%? That's half, and those are the ones who said it, right? Who answered the survey. And going back to the hope piece, Joel, I wanna talk about how I had some hesitation in terms of talking to people who have lost children, because you're right, it doesn't always end the way we want it to. And the first time I interviewed a parent who'd lost a child, it was incredibly difficult, and she shared the hope that she has every day to get up and get out of bed and put one foot in front of the other
Mm.
and try to maybe help somebody else not go through this. And over, I hear from parents who have lost children, number one, how truly happy they are that Will was willing to get help and got help. And number two, how they do have hope, even though they have lost children, but they have hope that they can help stop another suicide by doing whatever work they're doing. And so many of these incredible parents do unbelievably wonderful work through foundations or their volunteer work or whatever it is. They have used their pain and turned it into their purpose now. And their purpose is very often to just stop one more
Yeah.
tragic suicide.
I've thought about this a lot. I don't. I think that has to be the purpose, to keep going, right? I mean, and I'm not saying that that's the case for everyone that has lost a child, meaning that it's not again going to be the same purpose. Not every single person is going to start a foundation. Not every person is going to go out and speak. But I think that there is something there of needing to help others, and that has to bring some kind of purpose and hopefully some kind of peace. I don't know. I mean, like that to me has to be the biggest struggle, right? Like it doesn't mean that you didn't go through hell for this either, but there had to have been that sort of comparison in your head. We all do the natural comparison thing of saying, as bad as it was for me, I didn't have to go what they went through, so somehow that diminishes what you went through, and that's not the case. Like it, and they're not saying that, I don't think either, but I'm sure there was a little bit of that feeling, right?
Absolutely. And what I know is because of the numbers, like there are so many people who are going through the same thing that I did. And the reason that people glommed onto Will's story and have glommed onto our story is because it is hopeful. And we need some hope when you are in these desperate moments as a parent or a family member or a friend, to hear a story from someone that says, yeah, I was thinking about taking my life, or yes, my child slept on a mattress on the floor next to us for weeks. And then you say, well, how's he doing now? Well, you know what? He's actually doing pretty well. Does that mean his battle's over? No, but he's doing pretty darn well. And that is so hopeful for people to hear.
I mean, by the way, we live in a world right now where everybody needs hope, and that's before all the mental health stuff. Well, it's all related, of course. What where are we at now? I mean, you said before that you're not their therapist. I would push back on that and say you are, and maybe it's just the wrong label, right? But I think I think back to, here's the example I'll give you, and it's one of my favorite sound bites. I wish I had it queued up because I would play it again. It's one of my favorite sound bites in the history of this podcast, so much so that I included this story in my new book, Small Ball Big Dreams. Which sounds like I'm just slipping in a promo in the middle of a hard conversation here. But chapter 13 of my book was about Tech Nine, the Kansas City rap legend. Mm-hmm. And when I had him on, I just thought it'd be cool to have him on because, one, he's a big name and he's doing something, something most of us can't relate to. And how does a guy now in his 50s still stay relevant, in rap music when it's I think probably always going to be a young person's game. And we got to talking this and this. He's on a tour bus on his way from Memphis to New Orleans and bringing the energy. And I said, what did you dream of growing up? I was scheming for this next book. Hey, maybe if it's a good story, he could be in Small Ball Big Dreams. And he says, when I grew up, I wanted to be a psychiatrist or a psychologist, but they didn't teach that in my schools. So I stole the books from the library and I studied it. But then I went off. I was a dancer, and dancer led to music, and on and on and on. And he said, but what I started to realize over time was I'd hear from people at meet and greets or on social media that would say to me that your lyrics from this song helped save my life, or your lyrics from this song took me out of a dark time. And my journey and my music ended up leading me to be their psychologist. So you don't need a degree for this. And I'm not saying that people with degrees, I mean, they're I don't know how they do what they do. They're heroes. But you also have that ability, just with the power of storytelling and your experiences, and now your ability to connect others. And so I know that, like, what you're doing is heroes work that you never expected to sign up for. But you see it all, not all, a lot. You hear a lot. I know people are reaching out to you without even knowing that, because why wouldn't they? People need a safe place. People need to be able to find some comfort, like you talked about. What gives you hope right now? Because for me, I think we're past sort of the COVID. We're never going to be past the COVID aftermath. But the 14, 15, 16, 17-year-olds now were younger then. Our kids, I've got a 22-year-old, you've got a 22-year-old. Our kids were living this at the worst of times. Are we getting better? I know that people are more willing to talk about it now. That's got to be helping. What gives you hope?
What gives me hope is that I do think the younger generations are leading us in this mental health field, in terms of they're talking about it and they're forcing us to talk about it. And because of that, then, I'm in my mid 50s. My children are adults now. But because of their generation willingness to talk about it, younger parents now are thinking about these things and talking about them like you and I, it didn't even cross our minds when our kids were little, right? Like I would have never thought about saying, let's talk about mental health and if you're feeling this way and that it wouldn't have even been a thought until our world came crashing down. And so that to me is so hopeful that the millennials and the Gen Zers, they are talking about this and they're talking about it with their little kids. And I want that to be my big mantra moving forward is like, if you are a young parent, this is when you start talking about it, not waiting until the crisis or waiting until, you're going to middle school or whatever, but from birth, we start talking about this and that becomes more the norm. And that's what gives me hope.
I won't get into the whole story, but I was sitting at something recently and I was just in a mood. Okay. I don't show those too much, by the way. I know how to do the TV face and push it aside, but I was feeling a little antisocial, wasn't really feeling it. And had a friend there and her daughter was there. And my friend walked away and her daughter, who was like 20 or something, just turned to me and she's like, "Hey, are you okay?" And I'm like, that. I'm like, yeah, I'm totally fine. But we would never have asked that question, Susie. No chance. And when I listen to my kids talking now, I'm not saying they're all sitting around a circle and sharing their deepest thoughts, but they're willing to say some things to each other that we would never, ever, ever. So that to me is what gives me hope. That gives me the progress that I don't know if the stigma for the generation before us will ever go away, and that's fine. It's going away some for our generation. And I think that, as you said, the millennials, the Gen Z, and down to the next ones, Gen Alpha, I guess, they don't like you talked about not having internet at one point, right? They don't know a life without internet. They don't know a life without mental health. That stinks, but I think that they're going to lead the way is what I think.
Absolutely. And mental health is not this separate thing, right? Mental health is part of our health, period. And they are understanding that in a way that we never did. And it's amazing to me that in such a short time, and I think that's one of the good things about the internet and social media. And I know you had my friend Tracy Foster on not too terribly long ago with Screen Sanity. But I think that's one of the positive things for the younger generations is that, people are sharing things far more openly and using social media sometimes to do that. So that is so, so hopeful to me that changes are happening and the younger generations are not looking at mental health as like this separate situation. No, it's all part of health, all part of our physical, mental health.
Yeah. I had so much hope when I heard that young woman say to me, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, I'm totally fine. Like I just was in a little bit of a mood, but the fact that she would even think that, it's like, wow, I think that was, to me, that was representative of her generation.
Absolutely. And what you said about like your kids talking to each other and even you guys about some things that we would have never in a million years said to our parents, right? And that is awesome that a young person would have the confidence to ask you that question even.
Well, and one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on this podcast is, I mean, I'm not the mental health podcast. I'm not the fill in the blank podcast. You're specializing in that. But when I get that chance to, at least, I want to direct anybody that's listening to this right now, if you're going through something like this. And by the way, most parents of teenagers, young adults are going through some version of it. You may not even know it, but there's a good chance that you are. And by the way, if your kid's not, their friend is.
Yep.
Just statistically, that's the case.
Yep.
So I can tell you this from experience, you meaning the audience, that if any of this is resonating with you at all, go listen to Susie's podcast because it will give you hope and perspective. And by the way, if you have a friend that is going through it, you'll be able to support and understand better by just hearing this and learning from it, because we all be better. I want to get to my baseball themed questions. What's the biggest home run that you've hit? I guess we could say whether it be the podcast or this mental health journey or anything, I guess, but what's the biggest home run you've hit with all this?
Just starting the podcast, honestly, Joel, was probably the biggest home run because
Yeah.
I had to overcome a whole lot in order to do that, and I think that that is yeah, that's definitely what I would say is the biggest home run right now for
I
me.
love that. And I'll just give everybody a lesson on that too, because as someone that was told when I started my podcast 8 years ago, 7, 8 years ago, and I was, well, I was doing it to support the speaking business. And, oh, well, you could do this because you know how to interview people. Yes. It was still scary as heck to start it. Like, where do you set it up? What buttons do you push?
Yeah.
How does, like, all of it? It's scary.
Yeah.
And so I think the home run there to me, like if you're thinking about a podcast, writing a book, whatever a project it is, just try it, start it,
Yep.
or you're going to wait on it forever. And look at the lives that you're affecting by taking that jump. It's a scary thing. That is a home run. How about a swing and a miss along the way? And what did you learn from it?
That is a question that I have spent actually a fair amount of time thinking about because I've had so many incredible experiences. But one swing and miss that I would say is I hired somebody to help with some marketing, and I would do that differently now. I would differentiate between someone that I had a lot of common values with versus somebody who really specializes in podcast marketing. So that's what I've learned from that.
There's a lot just in entrepreneurship there that I think you have to learn the hard way sometimes.
Yep.
Because it's different for everybody. And so what works for one doesn't work for others. What is small ball to you? What are the little things that add up to big results?
The little things are the phone calls, the texts, and particularly the people that I don't know who will come up to me, even like at a national conference, and say, "Hey, I listened to your podcast and I want you to know it has really helped me."
Mm.
And it seems so small, but those are the things that keep me going and keep me wanting to do this work and keep me continuing to interview people, put out more content because it is helping people. And it's hard to say that in a way because I don't want, it's not me, it's people sharing their stories. But I know that it is helping people to not feel so alone and to feel some hope in the midst of some really, really dark times.
Yeah. All right. I want to hit 4 final questions as we round the bases. The most important of all of them, number 1, is how's Will doing?
Will is doing great, actually. So Will just got married. He graduated from college. He just got married. So they're getting all settled in. And he's now the director of Balladeer Theater Program, which is through the Culture House. And they do amazing work. And he continues to impact the mental health world by producing shows and acting in plays and things to do with mental health. And so he's gone from using the love of music and being on stage with the You Matter Festival to channeling it into this, some really amazing plays that actually his wife wrote. They were, so they're an amazing team. Will and Kaylee are. And so thank you for asking, but it's really a joy to see them, again, using some of the pain and struggles that they've experienced to impact other people.
At some point, I might try to connect my daughter with him. She's studying theater and music in college right now. So
awesome.
Up at DePaul in Chicago, the creativity of those kids is absolutely unbelievable, and I couldn't do any bit of what they do. And I'm in awe of all of them. So I'll have to tell her that because there's no way she's going to listen to this, but maybe she will. You never know. Second question, a little bit more serious. You touched on it just briefly, but I know that your husband Dan is an orthopedic surgeon. When someone tears their ACL, he knows exactly what you need to do. And when someone's shoulder pops out, he knows what to do. And I could bring my wife in right now to talk about her 30 minutes of skiing career that ended up with a torn ACL, and that never happened again. But that was easy to diagnose, right? But we're talking about mental health. is so much harder to diagnose, yet we don't view it. We're starting to more. We don't view it like the knee injury. We don't view it like the broken foot. What do you think of that? Because I feel like once we start thinking about it like any other injury, that's why concussions are so hard.
Mhm.
Like maybe I could push through it. Yeah, but you have a brain injury.
Mhm.
How do you make sense of all of that? Because I feel like if we could start thinking about this in terms of a normal, quote unquote, normal injury, we might be better off.
Absolutely. And when it becomes part of preventive medicine too, right? Where we go and get our yearly physicals as part of taking care of ourselves. We go to the dentist every 6 months to keep our teeth healthy. And when at some point, hopefully in our lifetimes, going to some kind of mental health something as a preventive measure as opposed to, oh, I have to treat this injury, I think that's when we'll say, boy, we have really arrived. But I think one of the big challenges with mental illness and mental health is that it's invisible. And, you tear your ACL, there is a test or there's an MRI that says, oh, yep, there's the tear. You break your foot, it's broken. You can see it. It's, and I think that that's what makes mental health issues so difficult. And historically, it's been just throwing medicines or therapy at a collection of symptoms and hoping that something works. And that is certainly continuing to change and evolve and become more sophisticated, where, it's not just throw spaghetti on the wall and see what sticks, but there is still some of that is part of mental health. I think that's what makes it particularly challenging, as well as the lack of appropriate number of mental health providers. That is a huge
Mhm.
issue that we're facing. And, try to get into a psychiatrist, try to get into a therapist and see how long you have to wait, or how many of them will say, well, we're not taking new patients or new clients. So, but I am hopeful in that that is changing, and things have changed so much just in the last 20, 30 years.
Yeah.
And ever since we have been able to take pictures of the brain. And now it's like, okay, we have the technology and the capabilities that we are just starting to scratch the surface,
Yeah.
I think, on our knowledge of the brain and mental health and mental illness.
Our third question as we round the bases, you had on my broadcast teammate, Ryan Lefevre,
Yes.
I think about a year ago. And he is as good as it gets on this topic because he lived it, not through his kids, through himself. And I never knew him in those days, although that's not really fair to say that. I've worked with him for 18 years now. I've worked with him, I think, longer than anybody in my career now. And we'll go when we're on the road, we'll oftentimes go out and walk 3 or 4 miles together. And sometimes we're just talking about baseball or work and all that. And sometimes it's life. But when I say that I didn't see him like that, it's not really totally true, because I don't think you take it with you forever, right? I mean, you're not forever fixed. It's still there.
Sure.
Just curious how that conversation went, because I can't think of a better person to have on the podcast.
Ryan is amazing, and I met him when we were on a panel together a couple of years ago. And the thing that really strikes me about him is, he is using his platform to influence other people and to share so openly and vulnerably his story. And the first time I interviewed an adult with lived mental health experience, that was kind of a new thing. When I first started this, I was very tunnel visioned on, I'm going to talk to parents. But then I had a conversation with a friend who had been going through some pretty significant mental health issues. And I thought, you're saying things that are making me understand things that I didn't understand prior to this conversation. I would love for you, my friend Trevor, to share this with people, because I think that there's some serious power in an adult, particularly to your point earlier, in an adult male sharing very vulnerably, and these successful adult men saying, yeah, I was at the pinnacle of my career. I had, quote unquote, had it all. And, like Ryan said, I'm curled up in the fetal position in my closet thinking, I don't want to keep living. And for Ryan to be so willing to be open and honest and vulnerable is such a great example of someone who's really turning his very difficult time into something that's helping people. And I have all the respect in the world for Ryan.
Yeah. And I mean, as you and I are recording this, I just got back from spring training and sat down with Lucas Urseg, who is really one of the Royals closers. He was closing last year. He'll be 8th, 9th inning this year. And they acquired him in a trade from Oakland, and a recovering alcoholic, mental health. And he is now talent wise, he's got the chance to be a superstar. But his greater mission on that is helping others and sharing his story. That would have never happened in the old days with these athletes. They've got to be tough. And so again, that's generational. It's a sign of progress to me. Last question, my walk-off for you. And this is a very broad question, but if anyone is listening and going through something right now, beyond the obvious of, getting tough, look, if you got to call suicide prevention, if you've got to call 911, do it, please. But if you're just going through something or you want to learn a little bit more, what's a good first step to take for people in terms of maybe noticing some signs or having conversations with their kids, or what's a starting point?
That is a great question. I think 988 is always a wonderful resource. And as my friend Shanna Burgess at Johnson County Mental Health would say, you don't have to wait until it's crisis enough to call. I tell people weekly to call 988, not because necessarily they or someone they love is in a crisis, but because they're looking for resources, answers, etc. And that's what 988 is there to do, is to help provide some of those answers. So that's a fantastic resource. We in our community, and I know you have listeners all over the place, but in our community, our local mental health provider, Johnson County Mental Health, they have a number of wonderful resources as well. NAMI, which is the National Alliance for Mental Illness, they are a nationwide organization with chapters in cities across the United States. And they also have incredible resources on their websites. So those are great places to start. And I would tell parents, and really anybody who is concerned about another person, that by asking questions, you are not going to put any ideas into someone's head. For example, Joel, if I was concerned about you and I said, hey, Joel, how are you doing? It seems like maybe something's not quite right. And, you were to confide in me and say, yeah, I'm not doing great or whatever. Well, then I would want to ask you, Joel, are you thinking about, or have you thought about taking your own life? And sometimes people are afraid to ask that question because they think they're saying, oh, I think you should do that. And it's really quite the opposite, because then the person knows you really care. And that helps you to know, what do I need to do next? Because if someone says, yeah, I'm thinking about that, I have a plan, that's when you do call 911 immediately. You get that person help. So I would encourage people to ask those questions that they might think they shouldn't, but they really should, because you're not going to plant ideas. You're going to help somebody.
It's important advice. There's so much here. I want to encourage everybody to go to the podcast. You can check out the website, thejustamompodcast.com. So that'll get you everywhere you need to go. We'll have it in the show notes as well. I wish you weren't doing this work. I'm glad, though, that you're doing this work, because it's making a difference. I don't need to tell you that. And I believe anybody that is putting in this work, helping others, that they're all heroes. I'm not going to single you out, because I know you'll be humble about it, but I think that every bit counts. And that includes not just you and not just Will, but that includes all of your kids and your husband, Dan, because it's a family affair. It absolutely is. And so I want to congratulate you on everything you're doing. That's probably the wrong way to say it, but I want to thank you for everything that you're doing, and really congratulate Will on what he has been able to do, and taking his experiences and making an impact on others, not to mention now being a married man. And that's very exciting as well. The Just a Mom podcast, check it out, everybody. Susie, thank you so much for sharing all this. It's really, really important.
Thank you, Joel. I appreciate you having me on the podcast.
It's around the bases. Everybody knows Joe Goldberg.